Never in my entire YouTube career have I seen a case with as many injustices as this. There is just so much that was handled so wrong. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please do subscribe, and if you're old here, hello again. My name is Kate Philpott and I cover true crime and missing person cases on my channel. And I know 2 videos ago I said in the new year I'm going to post consistently every 2 weeks and I'm never going to miss an upload. And look, I'm not going to do a whole thing about it, but the fact of the matter is there's just not a posting cadence that I can keep up with right now. Look, I tried. I would love to keep up with that cadence, but I just can't, because so much other stuff going on. So I'll still be posting YouTube videos, I'm not quitting. They'll just be uploaded whenever I can, because that's the most realistic thing for me right now, just in order for me not to get burnt out and start hating the process, because nobody wants that. But enough about me. I am dying to talk to you about this case. A family member at TRACY'S got in touch with me and asked me to cover it to get the word out there. And look, I don't have the biggest community out there, but this community is small but mighty. And once I start sharing these details, I just know that you're going to feel just as passionate about it as I do, because it is infuriating. There is injustice after injustice after injustice. I don't even know how this happens. So let's do whatever we can to make this case go viral. Like this video, comment on it, watch through the end, because it might just get into the right hands, or enough hands to escalate things and bring Tracy Lynn Day home. And her family need answers. So with that, let's get into it. This is the case of Tracy Lynn Day, who disappeared from Juneau, Alaska on the 14th of February 2019, which is just 3 years ago on Valentine's Day just gone. Interesting thing about Juneau, Alaska, there are no roads in or out. You can only leave by boat or by plane, which is one of the details that makes this a very unusual case. I mean, if somebody goes missing in Juneau, Alaska, it's very different to the likes of other missing person cases. Tracy is an Alaska native of Tlingit descent. I'm so sorry, probably butchering that pronunciation, I do apologize. And it's no secret that Indigenous women are targeted significantly more than other women. So with all that said, let's get into some details about Tracy. So she did have a small bump on her cheek from a previous injury. One of her top teeth was missing, and she also might have purple highlights, and she might have dyed her hair blonde. She has 3 kids, 2 daughters and 1 son, and her family described her as loving, kind, a woman who really prioritized being a mother. And because of this, she was a wonderful mother. She would just randomly show up at her daughter's house and help her do chores, like sweep the floor, things like that. She would also call her daughter many times a day. They were just always in contact, and that definitely makes it seem like Tracy just wouldn't be the type of person to disappear willingly. And for this next part, I urge you to open up your heart. I know 99% of you would anyway, but let's just empathize. Things were not easy for Tracy. Mental health was an issue for her. She had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, and also she struggled with addiction. And with that came quite a bit of homelessness. But with that said, at the time of her disappearance, she was doing quite well. She was living in an assisted housing apartment, she was in recovery. In fact, she'd actually been sober for 7 months at this point. And she was successfully moving through a substance abuse program and taking medication for her mental illness. But let's get into the details surrounding her disappearance. Tracy had been seeing someone at the time of her disappearance, and I'll tell you a little bit about him later. But for now, all you need to know is that this guy, who we're just going to refer to as John Doe, because that is how her daughter Kaylin referred to him in all her TikToks. I'll tell you about her later. John Doe lived on a boat harbour, which was actually pretty close to Tracy's mother's house. And on the 14th of February 2019, the day Tracy went missing, Tracy called her daughter Kaylin and she told her that she believed someone was after her. Now naturally, with Tracy's history, everything that she had gone through, this wasn't something that her daughter took incredibly serious at first. I can totally see why she wouldn't, but Kaylin told Tracy to go to her mother's house, right? And this being Tracy's mother. And so that's what Tracy did. She went to her mom's house, she dropped off her stuff, and it seems she didn't stay that long, although at some point she did mention that she was scared of John Doe and that she and John Doe were fighting. However, after dropping her bags off, she went back to John Doe's house. Now, here's where things get fishy, because after this, Tracy's family never saw her again. When Tracy was reported missing by her family, for some reason, JPD didn't file the missing person paperwork straight away. Think of that what you will. There were also witnesses that came forward and said that they'd heard them fighting that day. So, I mean, they must have been fighting pretty loudly, shouting perhaps. These witnesses also said that there may have been some physical violence involved, which is interesting because there are very specific things you would have to hear to start thinking down this route. Like loud bangs, maybe something smashing, all of which sounds very different to just screaming and shouting. So I'd be curious as to what specifically made them think that. Naturally, I'm sure we're all dying to know John Doe's side of the story, right? I mean, we last hear from Tracy being on her way to his house, and then there are witnesses saying that they heard them fighting. I mean, Tracy also said they were fighting, and there may have been physical violence. That's a ton of red flags in one already. So let's give this guy the benefit of the doubt, I suppose. Let's just see what he has to say for himself. And actually a relative of Tracy's called John Doe and recorded the phone call, which is interesting. Now it's not clear as to whether or not he knew he was being recorded, but this is what he said. He said that yes, there was a physical altercation with Tracy, and according to John Doe himself, he and Tracy were sparring with both oars. And he beat her over the head with a boat oar. If this is what he's admitting to, then how much more is there to this story? Oh, but wait, because then he says actually he wasn't sure if that was that day or if it was the year before. Not even the day or week before, the year before. The year before. So many thoughts, no way to unscramble them. And he was speaking very vaguely and all over the place about what actually happened. And Tracy's relatives would call him out on the lies they'd caught him in, and you know, they'd say, oh, so you did see her that day based on certain things he said. And he'd say, oh yeah, no, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, it could have been the year before. He just kept changing his story, and he was being absolutely no help at all. And that is incredibly suspicious, if you ask me. Now, John Doe also owned a boat, and there are rumors about him beating Tracy with a boat oar, and these parts we already know, right? But there are more, I guess we'll call them, stories about this boat that he had. He would have parties on this boat, and I mean, listen, if I had a boat, I'd probably have parties on them too. But there was one instance during his boat party when John Doe was essentially laughing and joking about the fact that it would be normal to find Tracy's blood all over his boat. Wow. He then went on to explain that it would be normal because of her period. And it would most likely be splattered all over the walls. If you're wondering where these stories were coming from, they were coming from the people that were there at this boat party. Immediately I'm thinking, please tell me they thoroughly forensically searched this boat. I'm begging you. They did not. That in itself is a huge injustice to Tracy. Was she not worth the hassle to them? Like, where is the logic? Now, another story regarding the boat actually came from a message that Tracy's daughter, Kaylin, received from a woman on Facebook. Now, she didn't know this woman personally, but she told her that she had also been partying on John Doe's boat. And during this gathering, the woman got cold, so John Doe gave her a jacket to keep warm. You know, being such a gent and everything. So she wears it for the night and eventually goes home, still wearing it, right? That's fine. She says like, oh, she'll give it back to him the next time kind of thing. She does wash the jacket to freshen it up for him, but only after she'd washed it did she realize that there was something significant about this jacket. I'm unsure as to how she knew this, but she believed that this was the jacket that Tracy Day had gone missing wearing. And she said that there could have been blood on it, but she wasn't totally sure. Now, what that means, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it was the kind of thing where there were brown splatters or marks on it that didn't initially look like blood, but when she realized what coat this was and who it belonged to, she thought, actually that could have been blood. But me being honest, I'm not 100% sure. Regardless, a police officer comes to pick up this jacket to be processed and analysed, and they apparently didn't find anything with the coat, but they had also, believe it or not, said that about the boat, which they actually just didn't bother checking. So it's hard to know honestly what to believe or who to trust at this point. Believe it or not, there is actually even more that John Doe himself has said when it comes to social media. This man was very active on Facebook and strangely enough wasn't holding back all that much with regards to talking about Tracy. He was messaging a bunch of people about it, he was posting about it, and he was saying things like that he killed her. Even he said this in a braggy way. He said that he put her in a crab pot, and he was bragging that he would get away with it because he was in with the police. So you can imagine when close family members of Tracy were hearing this and seeing online conversations like this unfold, they would immediately bring it to the police's attention. The police, though, all they ever did with him, even knowing all this information I've shared with you, was they went to his house, they knocked on his door, and they asked if he saw Tracy that day. To which he, of course, said no. And then they left. And to add salt to the wound, police would literally say that John Doe, no big deal. He wasn't a threat. He was just a regular innocent guy, and that there was categorically nothing sketchy going on with him. He just admitted to the blood. He just admitted to the act of killing her, to his actions after the fact. And you're not even gonna question him. There is just so much that points directly to foul play, specifically involving this man. And look, I'm sorry for getting so wound up on this. It is warranted in this case. This should never have happened. So after all this, surprise, surprise, John Doe does something that some might consider to be suspicious. He sells his boat. The boat that probably would have Tracy's blood spattered all over it, that was never forensically searched and examined. Now, in the early stages of this case, there were no official searches whatsoever, and Juneau PD claimed that this was because they didn't know where to look. And I did mention earlier in the video that you can only come in or leave Juneau by boat or by plane, both of which you need some kind of ID or a passport to do. And naturally you'd be on the plane or boat itinerary if you came in or left. So something they did do was they checked the plane and boat itineraries. At least they did something. But they also hadn't even filed the missing person paperwork when Tracy first went missing. So that means that at the time, if Tracy were to have left, it wouldn't have alerted to the officials that she was a missing person, so they would have let her pass, in which case she could have gone anywhere. But then there was something else that came up with the plane itineraries. They actually found a record of plane tickets from, I believe, Anchorage to Seattle, and then on to somewhere else in the States. And the significance of these tickets were that they were bought in Tracy's name. The name on the tickets was Tracy Day, except it was spelled T-R-A-C-I instead of a Y. And the birthday was only one digit off her exact birthday. Bizarre, right? So although this doesn't match 100%, it seems significant. My gut is telling me though that maybe those tickets were bought as a cover story. If, let's say, someone had done something to Tracy, they could have been trying to make it look like she left on her own, right? And I would be curious to know if the tickets were actually purchased before or after she went missing, because I'm not quite clear on those details. But you might also be thinking, don't you have to provide a passport or at least some kind of ID to buy plane tickets? Surely that's going to be on record. But Tracy didn't have a passport. So how was she ever going to leave? Regardless of whether it was plane, whether it was boat, you can't leave without a passport. And according to JPD, these tickets were bought without an ID. And not even with a credit card, but in cash. Who buys plane tickets in cash? Like, can you even do that? Well, okay, if these tickets were bought in cash, surely there would be CCTV of wherever it was that Tracy bought them from, right? Well, again, we're out of luck because JPD told Kaylin, Tracy's daughter, that the CCTV recycles after 30 days. And when this had all come out, it had been longer than that. But probably the part that irritates me the most is the fact that even with this, officers told Kaylin that Tracy was seen getting on this flight. By who? Where's the proof? Why do they believe that? If they obviously don't have CCTV and they don't have an ID and they don't have an exact record or a credit card and what makes them believe that? Why are they saying that's the truth? None of this makes any sense. And it's about to make even less sense because when Kaylin did go and look into this herself, she went directly to the source. She went to the airport and she received some very different information. They told her that they definitely still would have the CCTV footage. You would just need a warrant so that you can access it, right? But obviously, Kaylin couldn't just bring them a warrant herself. The JPD would need to orchestrate that. But they didn't. This just wasn't a priority to them. And not only that, but they lied directly to Kaylin about it. Oh yeah, it recycles every 30 days so we can't get the CCTV. That's just a full-on lie. Not only that, but the airline also told Kaylin that you absolutely cannot buy a plane ticket without an ID or a credit card. And you also can't travel without an ID. So Tracy wouldn't have been able to get on this plane anyway. Again, they're caught out in a full-on lie. If she wasn't able to get on the plane, then why are they telling her daughter that Tracy herself was seen getting on this flight? Oh, and there's more. There's more. The airline told Kaylin that no ticket like this ever even existed in Tracy's name. Even in her fake name with the I instead of the Y, and even with the birthday that was one digit off. So where did this even come from? Like, who is starting rumors like this? Is this someone in the JPD saying, oh, let's just tell the family that she got a flight somewhere so that it looks like a runaway and they can't take this any further? Now, if you're anything like me, you're hearing this story and just getting more and more disappointed or just straight up angry with the JPD. And unfortunately, that's not even where the injustices end. They have, over the years, come to Tracy's family with some stories that, you know what, I'm not even going to comment on the stories until after, and I'd love to know if you perceive them the same way I do. One of these stories was that there was a store clerk in a convenience store in Wrangell, a little bit away from Juneau, and this clerk had come forward to say that he saw Tracy there and that she was alive and well and she was just buying cigarettes. And police told this to Kaylin as if it was absolute fact. They also told her that this was good enough to close the case and that she should just move on. I'm sorry. Who has confirmed 100% that this woman was even Tracy? Who has confirmed the reliability of this clerk? For all they know, this could have been someone calling up, posing as a clerk, trying to make any police or media attention on this case just go away. Could this person be protecting themselves? Could they be protecting somebody else? And even if he was telling the truth, this really could have been anyone buying cigarettes. I mean, surely you'd need a family member to confirm if this was definitely her or not. Could police not follow this lead to the bitter end to confirm 100% whether it was or wasn't Tracy? But look, Kaylin was amazing in this scenario. She was not just taking their word for it anymore, so she took it upon herself to get on the phone with the person who allegedly said this, okay? And you will never believe what he had to say for himself. He told Kaylin that he keeps telling the officer that it was not Tracy. And the officer kept insisting that it was. Obviously, whatever officer this is just trying to close the case and doesn't actually care about the truth. Or Tracy, or Tracy's family. I mean, why do people like this even go out of their way to get into law enforcement at all? And to make matters even more infuriating, there was actually a similar incident of, I believe, another store clerk in Fred Meyer's who had claimed that he saw Tracy alive and well there, and police also tried to take this as absolute fact without 100% proof. Like, all of this is absolutely terrible, like, disgusting, really. And then, to make matters even worse, again, they would say things to Kaylin like, she probably took her life. She probably just left, and she was mentally ill, and she was a drug addict. You know, she didn't even want to be around you anymore. So she must have started a new life. They even had the audacity to say, oh, she's probably just out partying and having a good time. It is rare that I'm left truly speechless on this channel, but look, Kaylin is absolutely amazing. And she had the courage to say to them, "What if this was your mother?" To which they responded, "Oh, my mother wouldn't get herself into this situation. She doesn't drink, she's not into that kind of thing, blah, blah, blah." It's very clear how little they value Tracy's life. There was definitely no acknowledgement of the fact that Tracy had actually been sober for 7 months. She was doing a lot better. She was becoming more self-sufficient. She was living alone in an assisted housing apartment, successfully moving through a substance abuse program. And she was on her medication for her mental illness. Like, there was absolutely zero acknowledgement of that from JPD. They just decided, oh, she's a drunk. Oh, she's an addict. And that's it. Naturally, in a missing person case where the person disappears under mysterious circumstances, a lot of leads are going to come in, and that has been the case over the last few years. But in some of these situations, or most of these situations, the police would say that they came from a reliable source. What does that mean? Where are they getting that from? Some of the stories that came in either to Tracy's family or to law enforcement were that she had started a new life and that she didn't want anything to do with her old life. There was one email that came in to Tracy's family that was from a man who allegedly knew Tracy now, and that she was in Australia living her life, so just leave her alone. And others came in that said that they knew where Tracy's body was. Even if one of these is true, they can't all be true. So multiple people are out here just lying about something like that. And it's not like the family don't already have enough on their plate and enough to think about. Jesus Christ. There wasn't even a reward. So it's not even like they had an incentive to just be spreading these fake stories about this missing person whose family are devastated. But there's one lead in particular that came in that poses a whole new theory. There was a woman that called Tracy's mother directly and let her know that she was actually with Tracy the day she disappeared. The two of them were in a car together, and the police pulled them over for whatever reason, and there was a bit of a tiff. So one thing led to another, and Tracy ended up raising her voice at the officer, and this then escalated into the officer taking his baton and beating her until she wasn't breathing anymore. That's what this woman said. After this, he threw her into the back of his police car and drove off. This sounds so relevant. It's almost like how has nothing been said about this up until this point? Like, something like this could solve the entire case. But then who would you share this information with? The police? Well, doing that might actually put her own safety in jeopardy too. So, I mean, this woman was just scared to come forward. She was terrified for her own life, and still is, which again is absolutely fair. But then at the same time, how do we fact check something like this at all? It's definitely a sticky situation. So clearly up until this point, there is next to nothing being done about Tracy's disappearance, about the investigation into her disappearance, about John Doe, and months were passing without Tracy returning home safe and sound, which, you know, with every single day that passed, her family were just growing more and more concerned and more frustrated. So they decided to see if they could escalate the case to the FBI. So that's all well and good, but then they hit yet another roadblock. Without the investigator's approval, the investigator in JPD, that is, this just wasn't possible. It's a requirement that the local police department signs off on a case and says, yep, this is suitable for the FBI. But they wouldn't file that paperwork. At this stage, what good reason did they have not to? Were they just lazy? Were they biased in some way? Did they know more than they were communicating with the family? Were they covering up for someone like John Doe? Or the police officer that allegedly beat Tracy with his baton and took her away? Like, there are definitely elements of cover-up, it seems. I'm not saying anything is fact here, but it seems. Did they not see her as important because she struggled with addiction or with mental health? Or, and this has to be brought up here, is this a racial injustice? Like I said at the beginning, Tracy was an Alaskan native of Tlingit descent. So all of this just left her family even more emotionally messed around, because they just want someone to listen, someone with some kind of authority and investigative training and resources. And nobody would. Now, around a year after Tracy went missing, something was found that led to a break in the case. Some clothes were found along a trail up a mountain that's incredibly rocky and difficult to climb, and also near a very sharp ledge with sharp rocks and a big drop. And the area these clothes were found was way out of the way of society, and definitely not the kind of place that a ton of people would have access to. And the nature of how these clothes were found was weird as well. They were beautifully neatly folded and hidden under some bushes. Whoever put these clothes there wanted them to be far away from where people generally go. But what is the significance of these specific clothes? Like, why do we care? Well, let's get straight to the point here. These were the clothes that Tracy went missing wearing, and Tracy's ID was in the pocket. So that's the significance. The clothes didn't seem to have any blood on them, but it definitely gave the JPD good reason to search the mountain at last. JPD had a search dog go up there, and this dog led them to an area that is so treacherous that you can't even walk on it. It's absolutely not possible. So they brought in expert professional rock climbers, and that didn't lead to anything at first. From here, they moved out more horizontally as opposed to going up more vertically, and this led them to a makeshift gravesite. Hang on a sec, we might actually have something here. This gravesite was made up of a wooden cross with a beaded earring hanging on the cross, and there were some tarp nearby as well. And the main reason this location was of significance was because a cadaver dog had alerted to it, letting them know that there was something there. Now, one of the first things they checked out was, did this earring on the cross happen to belong to Tracy? So they brought it to Kaylin and they asked her to look at it and assess whether or not it belonged to her mum. But unfortunately, she just couldn't tell. Her mum owned a lot of jewellery, and specifically as an Indigenous woman, she owned a lot of beaded jewellery like this. So it could well have been Tracy's. It could have. But she just didn't know, and she didn't just want to say it for the sake of it, you know? So that was the end of that. They refused to take up the gravesite because they didn't know if it was for certain Tracy's. A very frustrating thing about this part in the case is that JPD wouldn't even tell Kaylin or anyone in Tracy's family the exact location of this gravesite. So even if she or anyone else wanted to go dig it up and see if it was in fact Tracy there, even just for their own peace of mind, they couldn't do that. Also, Kaylin made a really good point about this when she spoke about it on her TikToks, that even if there was a body there and it wasn't Tracy, that's still pretty important to dig up. This is not like an official graveyard or anything like that. And we've spoken about it on this channel before. A lot of people go missing in Alaska each year. So this could very well be another missing person, which, newsflash, JPD is also important. They don't really seem to understand that. And when there are areas as mountainous as this, you can only imagine that a gravesite in the middle of nowhere must be significant to some degree. But alas, when Tracy's family mentioned this to one of the investigators, he said, "I don't think there's a body in there." Great, well, I mean, I think you would want to know that rather than just think it. Just my opinion. But this is also just totally ignoring the fact that a cadaver dog alerted them to this location. I mean, come on! I think mentally I'm gonna need a little break from the JPD. So let's get back to John Doe, because believe it or not, I'm actually not done with him yet. Apparently, he had walked along the trail where Tracy went missing, and he told JPD that along his walk he noticed a spot that looked like a woman was attacked. What does that look like? He said there were clothes everywhere, maybe a burn pile, and that JPD should check it out. And from what it looks like, it was the location where Tracy's clothes had been found. But at this point, when he brought this up, that location hadn't been released publicly. Now, JPD said they'd looked into this and that there was nothing to it. And there are a lot of people in Juneau that are very suspicious of John Doe and believe he's guilty. His family, for one, they had some pretty interesting things to say about him. And I always think that if somebody's own family even turns against them, like, that says a lot. They actually shared some very interesting stories about him with Tracy's family. So he had previously been married, right? And during the process of going through his divorce with his ex-wife, he did something evil. That's honestly the only way you can describe it. He took his ex-wife's 2 dogs out to the back garden and got rid of them, we'll say, in the back of the head. He then took photos of these dogs and sent them to his ex-wife. Lads, you have to be really messed up to do something like that. Like, this guy, this is the guy that Tracy was last known to be with. The same guy who was heard fighting with Tracy on the day she went missing. The same guy who was laughing and joking about how likely it was that Tracy's blood is probably splattered all over his boat. There was another little family anecdote. And this is basically about when his in-laws first met him, right? So they all went on his boat, they were out on the water, and there was a disagreement of some sort. And he took them to an island. He took his in-laws to an island and tried to kick them off the boat with no mobile phones, no means of communication, no way to be transported back to civilization. That's fucked up. That's basically saying, hey, I'm okay if you die out here. I know I've told you about John Doe, and I've told you about the story about the police officer and the baton. But there is also another theory. And this theory was going around in rumours in Juneau. Listen, this part's a little heavy, so just to mentally prepare you. This couple was allegedly going around and bragging that they had beaten Tracy up, dismembered her, and threw her in a rubbish bin. Now, Tracy's family don't believe that there's really much weight to these rumours, but I would like to know what in the world is up with this couple that they think that's in any way okay to joke about or brag about. If it's true, it's absolutely disgusting to brag about. And if it's not true, it's absolutely disgusting to brag about. Now, there's also the potential that Tracy is alive out there somewhere. And if she is, she could very well be in a difficult situation. Like, she could be going through anything. Or, on the flip side, is it possible that she did run away? I mean, maybe, but it just wouldn't make sense given the circumstances. And even going back to how Tracy was described as a mother, like, she was maternal to the point of almost being overbearing. She would go above and beyond even normal mother standards, which are already so high. Now, does that really strike you as the type of person that would just up and leave on her own accord? Before we move on, we have some loose ends to tie up. Something that really, really just pisses me off is that there has been so much evidence, or even just potential evidence in this case, like the CCTV from the airport, witness statements, Tracy's clothes and ID that was found in the bushes, Tracy's jacket that was given to that woman by John Doe at the boat party, the boat itself, people's text conversations and recordings of John Doe, and even just John Doe himself and anything he had to say for himself. And the evidence locker for Tracy's case is empty. What happened to the evidence? It didn't just disappear into thin air. Like, why is it all gone? Where is it all gone? It's like it never existed. Whether this is down to the incompetence of the JPD, or was it something more intentional? I don't know. Like, there is zero evidence, and the police are blatantly lying to Tracy's loved ones, leading them on with false statements, avoiding digging up the grave site that they found, avoiding looking into John Doe properly. And from the outside looking in, it really does feel like they're just doing everything in their power to not have this case solved. That's what it feels like. Now, since all of this has happened, John Doe has actually passed away. So even if we do eventually get answers in this case that lead back to him, justice can't even be served. He will never do time for anything. Tracy's own mother passed away without even knowing what happened to her daughter. That in itself is heartbreaking. And on top of that, since Tracy's disappearance, she has become a grandmother. Her daughter, Kaylin, who very kindly helped me put this video together, has had a son. And if Tracy is out there somewhere, she doesn't even know she's a grandmother. She doesn't know that she has this gorgeous grandson. And look, I don't know why the police are not prioritizing this case. All I know is that Tracy Lynn Day is a real person, a real human being, with a real family, and real interests, and real personality traits, and real feelings. And she's missing, and has been for over 3 years now. And they don't care. So at the end of the day, it comes down to community. You and I are real people that are connected to this case, because you can't hear about this case and not feel deeply moved by it. So I'm leaving Kaylin's GoFundMe linked in the description. If you can help her out even just a little bit, that will be amazing. Even something like €2, $2, it all adds up, it all makes a difference. She has hired a PI and I'm unsure of any updates on that, but last I heard she was also looking to hire a lawyer because she is sick and tired of being heard and nothing being done to bring her mum home. Because it's authorities that should be investigating this. It should never fall into the laps of these already distraught family members. So if you can help out at all, please, please do so. Speaking of Kaylin, she is doing amazing things on TikTok. She's grown her TikTok to over 65,000 followers as of the recording of this video. It's probably even higher now at the time you're seeing this because she's growing so fast. She does ASMR content, but she does also keep her mom's story alive on there. And she's really good at ASMR. I swear to God, this girl goes live every single day for hours. Every single time I go onto TikTok, she's live. Like, I don't know how she does it. Anyway, go follow her on TikTok. Her username is Kaylin J. Schneider. She's also said that anytime she or anybody else makes a video about Tracy's case, the views get suppressed. So let's fight back against the algorithm here. Again, like I said, it's about community. And the fact that you've made it this far in this video is a huge help already. So thank you, honestly. And also head over to the TikTok I've just uploaded about Tracy's case too. Again, it's a huge help to watch the whole video, watch it right through, and just interact with it in any way that you can so that more people can hear about the injustices in this case and come together to help Tracy's family. Thank you so much for caring about this case. I hope you have an amazing week. Remember to drop a thumbs up on this video and let me know what you think about this case, because I don't think I've been this mad about a case in a long time. Alright, I'll love you and leave you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys.